Welcome to Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free. Good morrow, Otterites. This is episode 177. I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis.
And it's my turn to captain, Otterites. So this is, of course, Code of Honor, second Friday of the month. And as we have been doing, these are themed Code of Honors, based on the Our Heroes episode that you will hear next week. So this is the aperitif to the main course of next week.
The antipasta? Yes.
I was going to call it the titillation leading to next week's consummation.
Oh, aren't you so... that might be the winner for us.
I mean...
I think we might be surrounded
I
here,
much
Tex.
prefer culinary metaphors. But, I mean, I guess if you
There's
work the word
so many
penetration...
places you could go with that.
Yeah, if you work the word penetration into your metaphor...
Yes, the titillation to next week's consummation of the penetrating discussion.
That might just be a winner.
I was going to say, I don't know how we can compare with that. That's just like over the top.
Otherwise, if you've listened a bit, you know that Robert and I are very fond of the innuendos.
Yes.
Francis tries to avoid them. He's of a little bit more of his character fiber perhaps leads him away from that.
And yet I'm the only
more.
one that's ever dropped the F-bomb on air. So
No.
Robert has.
I used it because when we talked about... What was it? Actually, was it the
beginning of the philosophers, or
No, I want to say it was, even though I've been listening to the episode recently about how did this happen, the rise of fascism, I was thinking that somewhere in one of those World War II episodes, I thought it was the rise of fascism, I dropped it because I said the world went effing crazy.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And
except you gave us the full Monty.
Yes, I gave the full Monty.
Yes, we did not edit that one out.
Yes, because I specifically said not to, because there was no other way to express that.
Yes, and we did not. We edited it out when Francis did it.
Yes.
Francis did not plan his. Robert did. So, onward and upward. Again, episode 177, Code of Honor, geared towards our philosopher for this week. And that philosopher is Immanuel Kant.
Yes.
He's pretty hard to wrap your arms around.
Uh-huh.
Perhaps even more so than Hume or Locke or anybody that we've done up to this point.
Well, to quote Monty Python, as philosophers go, he's the big one. Yeah.
I don't know, a lot of the quotes that I'm reading through, because I've read quite a few now, I don't have a problem wrapping my mind around what he's saying. I think he's I'm understanding. My problem with him is, as I said in the pre-show prep, is, while I could agree with one of his quotes, but I would take it in a far different direction than he would.
Right. Yeah, his subtext travels along with him, and that's what we're kind of applying as we go along.
My subtext, obviously everybody's subtext will travel with him. I mean, that's standard. But where I would go with each of these statements would be, I think, far different than he would.
Right, and certainly we're going to dive into that next episode. But this is a guy with like a 50-year writing career here. Some of his main works are not written until he's well into his 40s and 50s, and he lives to be in his 70s. And there's a lot of baggage and a lot of mileage out of a lot of this stuff. But I thought I would go ahead and start us off with the quotes.
Please, go right ahead.
And then we, as normal, we'll turn it over to Francis, and then Robert the Hammer will finish the job for us. All right. So, simply to acquiesce in skepticism can never suffice to overcome the restlessness of reason. So Kant is an Enlightenment figure, and he's trying to make sense of what is the Enlightenment, what is reason, what are the parameters of human reason, and what's going on with us. How do we begin to learn and understand? So I like this quote in that I'm probably the resident skeptic of the group.
That's fair, yes.
That's fair. But there, you have to understand there is a limitation then to reason, or to skepticism.
I was going to say, yeah, because
you can't just be a skeptic. What's next?
Right, what's the point? Because if you say, well, I doubt that, to everything.
That's right.
What's the point?
Yeah, to believe in to deny everything is to believe in nothing.
Well, it's not even denial. Skeptic doesn't necessarily deny.
Doubts. That's right.
Yeah.
That's a better
Yeah,
word.
right. The skeptic's term is prove it.
Yes.
Or if you're from Missouri, show me.
Right. And in many ways, to me, the skeptics, and this is not to denigrate you specifically, Martin, but the skeptics' point of view with that prove it, I think it's a very intellectually lazy position.
Well, that's what Kant's talking about.
Right.
Exactly
Because it's basically saying, well, I don't have to figure anything out for myself. You have to prove it to me, because to me, it's also a very morally
Passive?
No. Condescending position.
Yeah, it is. It's
Because you're saying basically, if you're telling me right, you have to prove it to me, show me. You're saying, well, you have to convince me of your position.
Well, you're taking the power position in the argument.
Yes, you're taking the power position. That's why we are guilty or innocent until proven guilty, because the innocence is the power position.
Right.
You have to prove the guilt. If you have to prove the innocence, it changes the power structure. So it's intellectually lazy, as well as falsely claiming the moral high ground.
I think you guys are just right to the heart of it. You crack the nut right away. Again, the skepticism is fine. However, as he says, your reason is restless. It's going to search for answers.
Right.
Well, yeah,
that's
the
pure
part
skepticism. Pure skepticism. The reason it's lazy is because that's all it does. It doesn't do anything with that. It doesn't explore the question. Right. It just poses the question.
It just always says no and doesn't go any further.
Right. As Francis says, that's only so far along. That's it is intellectually lazy in that it says, I'm a skeptic, you prove it. The reason would then guide us to, yes, I'm a skeptic, I want you to prove it, but I will be an active participant in that proof, in that I will challenge you and push you. And as we always say, it sharpens the blade.
Yes.
Disagreement, not necessarily disagreement, but skepticism sharpens the blade. It makes you sharpen your argument.
Perhaps the difference between a Martinesque skepticism and the kind that he's railing against is the prove it, show me I'm wrong, prove that you're right, versus why. You ask why with your skepticism.
I'm a skeptic.
A why and a how.
Lay out your argument for me and let me process that with my reason. Does that then match my experience? Does that match what I have experienced that is in my set of arguments?
Right. And is my experience, just to give you the benefit of the doubt for the listeners, doesn't mean that your experience is always tantamount to perfection or correctness. The question then becomes, is my experience too limited in that I don't have the
right
to be to take your position?
Right.
You're open to having your mind expanded.
Right. I'm willing to accept the challenge of your argument.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. Accept the challenge of your argument. That is excellent.
And I have to work through then, where can I find a flaw here? And
you're using reason as your guide.
Reason, yes. And for Kant, part of your reason is your experience.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What you know is what you have experienced.
Yes, exactly, because he says all knowledge begins with experience, which you can make an argument for that. Yes, absolutely.
Right. We are fans of course, books here at Snakes and Otters. We love reading. That's a good way to learn things, but there is more to it than that. You have to go beyond the book experience and have a life experience. To
quote a certain admiral, I'll do it before Francis does, we learn by doing.
Oh, you beat me to it. Damn it, Jim. Okay, that's right.
Damn it, Jim. So that's what I knew you guys would run with this quote and really give a lot to it, and it's
well, there's a lot of truth to that because again, what he's railing against, I don't know that a whole lot of. Well, I don't know, I say that. Yes, probably in today's world, most people are in the camp that he is railing against. That intellectual laziness, that inability to actually explore the question put before them.
Yes, I mean that's part of his thing too. Is if I have a preacher to correct me and a doctor to take care of me, then I can just check out and not think.
I don't think that's
and that's one of his things. Is then no, you need to be thinking. It's not enough just to have someone telling you your diet. Think about it.
I don't know that quote necessarily goes there because to me as we have defined the skeptic as in the prove it, show me. Because really that's what he said. Because you're saying that the doctor saying you're dying. It's like, well, no, you got to do better than that. That's actually a very skeptic point of view. But what you're saying, how that should be used is the way we think of a skeptic. Okay, well, I'm skeptical. Show me where tell me your argument so that I can understand it. That's a far different form of skepticism, I think, than he's railing against, or at least the way I see it. Because to me, the pure skeptic is not just intellectually lazy, but doesn't even have the ability to engage in the discussion.
It could be unwilling or unable. I think it incorporates both.
Well, the effect is the same, most certainly.
That's correct. You won't necessarily know. That's an internal matter. But the question itself of that kind of belies the answer that there's a hell of a lot of lazy or unwilling people out there.
Yes.
I think that's what he's kind of trying to talk about.
That laziness and unwillingness to engage the question, he might call a skeptic in that particular age as in the prove it, as you said, Martin. But in today's world, that very same point of view is even not going so far as to say prove it. It's just no, you're an idiot.
That's right.
Wrong.
It's an outright denial.
I mean, yes. Today's environment, today's cultural discussion moment or whatever, today's zeitgeist.
I would say calling it a cultural discussion is very generous.
Yeah, the word discussion, it's very anti-Kantian. It's I'm right, you're wrong, and therefore not only are you wrong, you're evil, and thus must be destroyed. There's no sense of my reason is restless. I want to hear what you have to say. Let's lay it out for me.
Yes, I will say this.
And then I want to take my theory and my experience and hammer on what you're doing and see where the difference
Very
is.
much like what we do here at Snakes and Otters.
Yes, because it's exactly
I'm sorry.
Not what I was going to say, but that's exactly lines up with what I was going to say, in that it is very much at the heart of the education we received at Bellarmine, at that liberal arts education. Engaging the mind to understand everything.
Think. That's right. Critical thinking. Question.
But to us, especially Francis and I, the mind, unfettered by anything else, is a dangerous tool.
Well, yes, that's correct. Because
and that's going to sound very elitist, but it's not meant that way.
Well, because there's no object. The mind, by its very definition, is subjective in its outlook on life. It has to be. Comparing it against objective truth requires a broadening beyond itself.
Right, and I wonder, given his emphasis on experience, does he even believe in objective truth? Because he's very much against religion, from what I can tell.
Well, he does, because that's the scaffolding of his moral system, and we'll talk about this next episode about the categorical imperative.
Yeah, that's the big dog.
Well, that's right. That's the categorical imperative,
and all that stuff. So the quote I was mangling is this one here. So listeners, you're getting a bonus quote from Martin. If I have a book that thinks for me, a pastor who acts as my conscience, a physician who prescribes my diet, and so on, then I have no need to exert myself. I have no need to think. If only I can pay, others will take care of that disagreeable business for me.
Ooh,
So he's not endorsing that position, of course.
Right.
He's saying here's this.
He's commenting on the commonality.
You could pay for all of these things and not exert yourself and not think.
Well,
and he says your reason is so restless.
But you know what?
That can't happen.
Is this the core of what is the problem with modern society?
Absolutely.
Because most people have decided, I'll pay.
I'll pay for, yes.
Yeah.
I'll just pay.
And this includes our current social and political discussions.
Right.
I will pay by subscribing to whatever tribe I choose to belong to, or think that I belong to automatically based on identity, and I adopt that unthinkingly.
That's right.
That's
exactly it.
In one way to describe our core problem in modern discourse,
and
is that there is that people subscribe to that one point of view that they adopt rather than they reason their way into.
And Kant was a critic of that hundreds of years ago.
Which, ironically, I reasoned myself into my faith, which is very much a very Thomas Aquinas.
Because you are a convert.
Yes, because I'm a convert. Yes,
you reasoned and experience combined in an intellectual inquiry.
Yes, exactly.
To find a faith,
and it was not the intention when I started. Which makes it even more experiential, so very Kantian in that aspect.
Yes.
Which, I don't know that he would accept that as a valid end result, because there's one quote about the end of dogma is the beginning of knowledge or freedom or something like that.
Yeah.
But this quote he's talking about here is exactly the same thing. He says, do not accept this stuff just because somebody told you.
Right.
And that's his... that's kind of his bailiwick.
Right.
His
it's
wheelhouse.
Both sides of it. It's don't just accept it because somebody told you, but at the same time, just knocking it down is insufficient as well.
That's correct. You have to go the whole way.
Your reason is restless. It's going to make you do that inquiry based on learning and experience.
I got a great follow-up to that. And again, he would probably hate this. St. Augustine, our hearts are restless, O Lord, until they rest in you.
That's right,
and that's not where he would go. He would say, "Your
but it's the
reason
same
is restless."
concept.
Yes,
it's very much the same.
Your heart is restless.
If you work through your restlessness, you're going to arrive somewhere.
Yes. Now you may not end up in the same place as someone else, even with the same starting point, because again, our experiences are all subjective. But perhaps for him, the journey is the point.
Oh, in many ways, that's correct, because he's all about experience.
Yeah.
Everything's about experience to him. And you cannot navigate any of this without the experience. Now, the experience doesn't necessarily lead you to the right answer, but it's the only way to get anywhere. I mean, you still might end up in Timbuktu instead of New York City, but you got to get on a train somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I should have taken that left turn in Albuquerque.
I knew I was setting that up for you.
There are no La Brea tar pits in Scotland.
That's right. There is no Las Vegas in Germany. Anyway, we've slid into Bugs Bunny somehow there. But
then the episode is a success already.
When you get to My Bunny Lies Over the Sea, then you've really done something.
Spoken like the Scotsman, but that's anyway.
So, that's really good for the first one. So let's turn it over to Francis and let him hit us.
I'm going to continue with this a little bit, but I'm going to simplify this down. 3 words, gentlemen. 3 words.
Statute.
No.
Statute of limitations.
No, statutory
rape. That's way
3 words, LaRue.
That's right. Way back in Hill Street Blues, which most of our younger listeners don't even know.
Oh my goodness, Hill Street Blues. Yeah, I don't remember a whole lot of Hill Street Blues.
Yeah, I don't either. But that quote, I remember.
That quote has come into our lexicon, and it has stayed with us here.
Yes. Yeah, somebody talking to some guy named LaRue about an underage
LaRue was one of the characters. He was one of the detectives.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Still a good show, by the way. Still a good show. If you can catch it in reruns, it's worth your time. But anyway, the 3 words that I'm going to give from Immanuel Kant are, and this is kind of piggybacking what you're talking about, so we can probably breeze through this quickly. Dare to think. In my opinion, the operative word here is not necessarily think. It is dare. That's exactly where I think that is.
Yeah, because that's, again, a lot of what we've discussed, that idea of there's lots of kinds of bravery.
That's right.
Being brave enough to think is one of them.
That's correct.
In many ways, that is obviously there is physical bravery, which is a whole nother category. But in a lot of societies, the daring to think can be just as dangerous.
That's right, because it puts yourself outside of the group, and we are tribal creatures, and we cannot.
And the tribe has grown much stronger in the last 20 years.
Well, it's grown to the point where all the smaller versions of the tribe are subsumed under larger ones, and there's fewer of them. You're either left politics or you're right politics, and anything in the middle is some sort of gradation of one or the other, and that's kind of how we've polarized ourselves.
Well, it's not even just politics with left and right.
That's just the obvious. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, whether you're, anything. Gold standard or not.
Yeah. Free coinage of silver.
And some of that, and this is what I think Kant is talking about here, is when he uses that word dare, is some of that is almost a gravitational pull for many people. There are, and I'll steal the words from Gustus McCrae about weak-mindedness. That's kind of what he's talking about here. Is you should not allow yourself to be weak-minded and only go with the herd, only go with whichever way the wind blows. In fact, that is a sure means of destruction. I mean, the book Lonesome Dove it's about that. The character of Jake Spoon, that's what he does, and he ends up with a terrible end as because of that, because he won't think for himself. And he's
let's put this in context. We're talking about a time in the second half of the 18th century.
Yeah,
is when he lived. And I don't know what year he wrote this, but whether it's 1749 or 1789. I mean, he didn't live to 89. I think it's 85 was when he died, right?
Yeah, but yeah.
So whether it's 1785 or earlier, it could be a very dangerous thing to think outside the box.
Oh, absolutely.
To think for oneself.
To see any virtue in it, because that could get you killed.
Yeah.
Or accused of treason in many respects.
Yes. Obviously in the United States in that time, that would not be true. We would have been very much a dare to think, because we are totally trying new things.
He predates us a little bit.
But he dies after
the
formation of the United States, after the Revolution is won.
Right.
And even so, before we are very much in his lifetime daring to think.
Oh, that's correct. Yeah, the American colonial experience was such a change from where we came from, and some of that is because that's the reason we came here. Is we do not want anybody to tell us how to think. We want to think for ourselves. Some of that is Enlightenment thinking. This is exactly what Kant is talking about and saying it's a virtuous thing.
I don't know. For a lot of people who came here, it wasn't Enlightenment in the sense of the secular sense, because most Enlightenment thinkers are on the secular side.
That's right. Yeah. Huh?
As we know, a lot of people came to the shores of America for religious freedom.
Yeah, but then
which again is don't tell me how to think.
That's
right,
the same, in their mind, it's the same thing.
Yeah, it is an intellectual dare.
Yes.
It is daring to be of a different faith and arriving at that faith through an intellectual process.
Yes. Oddly enough, though, once they get here, a good number, if not most of those who came, then turned right around and said, well, no, you have to now conform to us. Now that we have arrived, you must conform.
That's right. Well, they've been bullied, so they themselves become bullies.
Yes.
In many respects,
yes, the Puritans in Massachusetts are a wonderful example of that.
Yeah, shit rolls downhill.
Pretty much.
But yeah, it's interesting how we've come back again to another intersection of intellect and faith.
Yeah.
Where superficially they would seem to be at odds, but as we know, they are not.
They can't be.
That's right.
At least, though, that's not entirely true. Because again, that depends on your cultural foundations. The cultural foundations that the West is founded on, no.
Right, because it's so Augustine.
Exactly. It's Augustine. It's all of the church fathers. It's all of the development.
Aquinas, it's a very
all through Aquinas and beyond.
Thing of you have to explore your faith through an intellectual scaffolding.
Right. Well, and if you look at how the Christian faith develops, it develops in multiple ways, but not the least of which is the persuasion of others.
Again, the idea of you can't just say, you're a poopy head. You have to win people over. You have to win people over to your position.
It's very anti-dogmatic.
Yeah.
In fact, he has problems with that.
As an example, in the public square, again, the discussion this summer around the Dawes decision has been, one side lashing out primarily, but the other side saying, look, we've been making this argument now for 40 years. We've been trying to be persuasive about this argument on two fronts. One, the initial decision was wrong, and two, that there is a concept of life in the womb.
Uh-huh.
It's not just a concept; it's a reality.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And say, here's this argument that we're making. You can disagree with the argument, but what is your counter? And right now, the counter has just been this summer of, screw you.
Well, it's a difference between.
It's like, no, guys, come on. Here's your moment. Persuade us.
Well, and therein lies
the
intellectual bankruptcy of the argument.
Well, the two sides, not to rabbit hole this, but you can make this, we can probably relate this to Kant fairly well. The two sides are approaching it from different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at the pro-abortion, pro-choice, whichever, if you want to use the pro-choice for them, fine. It's not the one I would use, but whatever. It's all about power.
Yes.
That's not how the pro-life, even though the pro-choice refuses to acknowledge it, that they think the pro-life side is also about power. It's not. It's not about controlling women's bodies. It's about the life of the child in the womb. So
it's an exploration of human potential.
Yeah. And so coming at it from those two different perspectives, in many ways, the pro-choice is that skeptic that says, prove it. It's like, well, we've been trying to prove it. You just won't listen.
We've been laying out an argument that you're not refuting.
Right. And you're
very
throwing
famously,
on us a position that is not ours. In many ways, this is what Catholics have to deal with when talking with rabid anti-Catholics. Is they'll say, well, you guys worship statues. No, we don't. Yes, you do. I'm Catholic. I think I would know if I worship a statue. It's like, no, you don't. You don't know that. Mm-hmm. You don't realize that you were... Really. At that point, there is no ability to have a discussion because you're not talking about the same thing.
Because the very question itself is dogmatic at its base.
Well, there's nothing wrong with dogma because the church
I'm not
has
saying
dogmas.
that. I'm just saying that
the problem is
you cannot argue against that though, because they just deny it.
Well,
when it comes to a dogmatic position, it's like I don't care what you say.
The dogma is that I believe that what you believe is this.
Right. That's correct. And they're not willing to...
No!
It's not. Dogmatic basically means you believe something absolutely without any underpinning necessarily to it.
No. You believe something absolutely. You cannot say without any underpinning because then you undermine our own faith.
Well, no, I'm not... Well, without necessarily any proof.
Again.
But that's what dogma means. You don't necessarily
not necessarily,
it.
Because...
dogma is the result of the intellectual inquiry of the faith.
Not necessarily, but dogmas that we... So, for instance, the dogma of the Immaculate Conception, the dogma of the Assumption of Mary.
Yeah, those are the common
those are two that are, especially the Immaculate Conception, they are rooted in scriptural beliefs, but they are not explicit in Scripture. Okay? So, you can make the argument that yes, they are dogma, but we believe them because of the intellectual development of that.
Well, the dogmatic portion of that is we did what we were going to say, we did all the intellectual background, and then make a definitive, authoritative, unarguable statement. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm...
Right, it's unarguable, but that doesn't mean it's without proof.
No, not at all.
But that's what you were saying, so I'm not saying...
What I'm trying to say is, it's about... Once it's a dogma, nobody questions how you got there. It just is. And that's the argument.
Well, yes, because you have to accept the authority. Whereas...
Yeah, or the proof, or whatever it is.
The authority comes with the proof. Right. The proof comes with the authority.
But again, from a Kantian perspective, it's okay to question that because of your restless reason. But you have to be willing to listen to...
say, I don't believe it.
you have to be willing to listen to the argument that gets you there.
Right, and that's why I say that using dogma with the pro-choicers' view of pro-lifers is bad, because their dogma truly does rest on nothing, because their view is all power. That's how they are projecting that.
Right.
Yeah. That is their dogma. That's whatever I can do. I should be able to do what I wish because I can. That's a power argument.
Well, it's the liberal.
It is an ego-driven.
Yes, there's some of that.
Central.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, it's rooted in narcissism in many respects.
It is rooted in
which that's dogmatic.
The effect on
it's
self.
epitome of liberalism. Though.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going with all this.
The effect on self rather than the effect on others. And Kantian proposition would be, no, you must think of the effect on others.
Well, and for the argument to bring the argument full circle, they simply deny that there is another in this case.
Yes.
Because they recognize the bankruptcy of that, of not addressing that. So you simply have to deny the other.
So again, the point is, as I pantomime the sharpening the razor on the strop, the whole point is sharpen the blade, make an argument, convince me.
Unfortunately, some arguments.
My reason is restless. Convince me. So, I think that's a good spot for a bourbon break.
Yes, indeed.
Right here. So, all right. So, what are you drinking, sir?
I am still working on the Wild Turkey 101. It's potent, gentlemen.
Now, is it the same glass, or did you pour some more?
Not anymore. No.
Okay, so you're really sipping yours.
Very much so. That's correct.
And so it's not neat. You did have one ice cube.
One ice cube. That is correct. Yes.
But you had it neat the first time, right?
No.
Oh, you did. Okay,
I put in. I have repented of my neatness.
Well, I have no problem with trying both ways. I think that's not a bad thing.
So, Mr. Howard, the bottle that stands before you. So you and I are doing this Yellowstone
Select.
What is the proof on this?
This, I think, was a 90? 93.
93 proof. And we've had some ice in this. This is a brand new. We're here at Studio F.
Yes, we just cracked it.
And yes, Francis just cracked it for us. A Yellowstone Select Landmark Edition. And let me tell you something. This is awesome.
It is. It's very good.
Freaking killer.
Yep.
You get that sweetness right out of the bottle, the bouquet, the scent immediately. It definitely does not have the same bite that the Wild Turkey 101 has. It is much smoother in that respect.
A little lower in proof, but not a whole lot. I mean,
but it's enough. I mean, that's
Yeah.
I mean, I love the flavor of this.
Yeah.
It's tremendous. Very mellow, very smooth. A touch fruity.
Yes.
You got a little bit of that fruit and some sweetness. Well mixed then with the woodsy char flavor as well. Wow.
It's really interesting that woodsy char flavor, which I think I've come to, again, I'm totally speaking out my rear end. I associate that with with that bite, along with the proof, and that's what gives that lingering effect in the mouth, I think. And that's where this primarily it's in the mouth again, a little bit different places than the Wild Turkey.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that tends to linger on the tongue, that char, that woodsiness, whereas that sweetness is all through the mouth and down into the gullet. I mean, it doesn't overpower the char. They mix together. They're complementary in an interesting way that many bourbons are not. Whereas one usually tends to dominate the other. With the Wild Turkey, that bite dominates the sweetness that is in there.
Correct. Yes.
Whereas this, I think, it is a very complementary blend, which is very difficult.
Yeah, they balance the flavors in this outstanding's well. And
yes,
I'm bowled over.
I had 2 ice cubes, and I think one is better, at least for the amount that I poured, because it melts fast.
It does, yeah.
And 2 watered it down just a little too much, but still, the flavors, even with that watering down, still come out so well.
Yeah. Now I had quite a bit of ice and let it melt, and I tell you what, it's...
And what was the price point on this, Francis?
Oh, it was about 30.
So again, similar price
It's
point.
very difficult to get a hold of.
Makes
Of
me wonder
course,
if it will
the
stay
Yellowstone
so-
TV show.
Yes, it has become almost a bit of a status symbol to be serving Yellowstone bourbon because of the popularity of that TV show. I mean, I spoke to the folks at the place where I bought it. I said, "Well, you're lucky we got some because we don't often because it sells out immediately." It's made by a small distillery down in Lebanon, Kentucky. And they do a fantastic job with it because it's amazing.
It's the real deal. It's distilled and aged in Kentucky. Limestone Branch Distillery, Lebanon, Kentucky.
That's right.
And
Yeah, not far from here.
they have a hit on their hands.
Very much so.
Very much so.
It's an interesting color. It almost looks like somebody has put tea in the bottle.
Yeah, it's a little paler than,
that's
than
correct.
some of the others that are aged a little longer. It does not have an age statement here on the bottle.
But for as smooth as
But,
it is, I would think it would almost have to be.
And it's got
more
a substantial proof as well. Because so oftentimes
It's a real sweet spot for
when
the
you
proof.
get when you get those higher
Real
proofs,
sweet spot.
you know, you sacrifice that smoothness sometimes. This
Yes.
does not do that.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely killer.
Yeah, very,
what a hit,
very good.
Yellowstone. What a
Yes.
hit. So, I think that takes us to...
Takes us to the hammer.
I do want to mention one other thing. We are about to break for lunch, and I scooped up a bottle of Verner's.
Yes.
It's not ginger ale, it's ginger soda.
Yes, that is
so
true.
that's a salute to my friend Robert here.
So, yes, being born and bred in Michigan, even though my parents both come from Eastern Kentucky, there's the old joke for those of us who are from Michigan that, you know, what's in our medicine cabinet is a can of chicken soup and a bottle of Verner's. And because when you're sick, you know, a lot of people, they give Sprite or 7-Up, although 7-Up's not as big a brand as it used to be. And, you know, in Michigan, you give Verner's.
yeah.
And if you're sick, Verner's will knock that crap right out of you real quick.
Yeah, I mean, you got a little stomach trouble, let's have some Canada Dry ginger ale. Nope, Verner's is different.
Yes, it is different. It is a stronger ginger soda.
Yeah.
Than the Canada Dry is. It looks watered down even in comparison.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, it's kind of the color of the
Yellowstone.
Yeah. So that is something we're going to have for lunch. We're going to crack that when we break for
So
lunch.
and speaking of, that now a lot of people would term that as a soft drink because it is a carbonated beverage.
Yes.
I do not count Verner's and Faygo, both Michigan staples, in the pop. It is pop because it's Faygo pop. In that soft drink category, so that is why it is the exception to my no soft drinks rule. Speaking of which, this recording marks not exactly the 1 year to the day anniversary, but pretty damn close since I gave up all soft drinks.
Yeah.
Marvelous stuff.
And the only soft drinks I've had are Verner's and Faygo cream soda. And I had those when I was in Michigan last April. Although the wife Mrs. Robert did get me some Verner's when I was sick as a dog a couple of months ago, which was nice to have.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm still the occasional root beer. I do love root beer.
Yeah. Now, if I wanted to have a float, I would definitely do the root beer. Yeah.
So yeah, but I'm trying to hold on to the whole. Let's push out the sweet. Let's not do the soft drinks.
Speaking of which,
I'm holding to it.
Listeners, you have failed in a command that Francis has given you. A year ago and a month when we recorded back to the how did this happen, the rise of fascism.
Yeah.
That's when I made the statement that I was going to give up soft drinks and it would have to be the following. So when I was doing that drink club at Circle K where you got basically every day you could get a free drink for a flat fee for the month, which was great when you're drinking them, but man. So in that episode, Francis said to our listeners, write in, make me take this step that the fellas have taken and join them in the giving up of soft drinks, which he has yet to do.
No, I have yet to do that.
So so on the one hand, I could lay that blame at Francis's feet and say, you have failed in your duty, Francis. But on the other hand, we could also lay that at the feet of our listeners who did not apparently cajole him enough into giving it up.
He needs the peer pressure.
He does.
Beyond just us.
Yes, apparently so.
Yes.
Oh, joy.
So I get it. They're difficult.
They are.
to give up. I mean, they are wonderful, but I tell you what, not that I don't have other health issues, but I think I just feel better pushing that sugar. There's just so much sugar in the damn things.
And bad sugar, too.
You know, not that I'm losing any serious weight or anything, but I think it has helped at least stabilize my weight. And I feel like I taste things better just limiting myself to kind of one a week or one every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And after a while, I have found I really don't miss them that much.
I thought I was going to have a harder time than I did. Of course, I replaced the caffeine with coffee.
Yes, and again, it's different. A different thing. Caffeine versus the sugar. I am drinking unsweet tea, so I still get the massive dose of caffeine that keeps me, from becoming a murderous lunatic.
Right, keeps the headaches away. That's a very real thing. Giving up caffeine causes headaches, massive headaches.
It is. It's an addictive substance.
It is.
No question. It's an addictive stimulant.
So, but I did not miss it nearly as much as I thought I would.
Yeah.
It was very easy for me to give up, because originally it was the carbonation, like when I give it up for Lent. I did not miss the carbonation, because I really don't even drink the carbonated lemonades that I used to.
Yeah.
Because the carbonation, it just sits up here in my chest because of the lap band. I've talked about that before. Even though I don't follow my protocols, I still have to deal with that effect.
Yeah.
But also, high acid stuff I can't drink anymore. That's one of the reasons why I don't even drink the lemonades anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I
very
still
upsetting.
like lemonade. I still like...
I love it. It's just hard to drink sometimes.
Carbonated water, I will still do a little bit of flavor in the water.
Yeah.
Because I do miss having flavor.
Yes.
So
I love drinking the cold water because I drink a lot of it.
Yeah.
But after a while, I was like, man, I need something else.
Yeah. So, I mean, a little, what do they call it? Bubbly.
Bubbly?
Yeah. So, I mean, I usually have a pack of that around the house.
Yeah.
To have a little bit of flavor. But again, that's a zero sugar,
I'll do
zero artificial sweetener even.
I'll do Crystal Light teas or grape drinks or whatever. Same kind of thing. Anyways.
That is a really good bourbon break.
Really good bourbon. Really
so
long.
Let's turn it over to Robert to hammer this all together for us.
So, as I am wont to do, gentlemen, would you please repeat your quotes?
Certainly.
So we have a basis
certainly.
for my understanding.
Simply to acquiesce in skepticism can never suffice to overcome the restlessness of reason. And I really love that word, restlessness.
Yes.
Your reason, your intellectual inquiry should be restless.
It speaks to the eternal quest that we are on to understand.
To understand. Not knowledge.
Right.
Understanding.
Understanding. Because knowledge is worthless without the understanding, in my opinion. So, Francis.
Dare to think. 3 words.
Dare to think. Dare to think. Which we talked about in the context of being brave.
Correct. Yeah, dare is the operative word.
Dare is the operative word there for you. But also to think, because so little of that does go on. So I have a quote picked out about experience and theory, which I was going to go with because it's really good. But then my eye caught this one. And I think I got to go with this. This is from his... Prolegomena to any future metaphysics.
That's one
it's
of his
basically a
early
prologue,
works.
is what I'm guessing it is.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like his second or third big work.
Yeah,
sort of after the Critique of Pure Reason,
which is his numero uno, his magnum opus. Yes.
So this one caught my eye because it speaks to so much of what we talk about so often. All false art, all vain wisdom, lasts its time, but finally destroys itself. And its highest culture is also the epoch of its decay. There's a lot to unpack there.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot to unpack.
I may have had too much Yellowstone bourbon to unpack that one, so you may have to carry this.
Well, that's my job. Is the hammer, is to carry it.
Rock and roll.
Yes.
Get it.
So,
the Ayatollah of rock and rolla.
The Lord Humongous.
That's right. Not that we're making any comment about your girth. No, of course not.
Or my length.
I just recently rewatched Road Warrior. It's on Tubi right now. Tubi is an awesome free streaming.
An awesome movie. Yeah.
So, all false art, all vain wisdom. I like those phrases because it speaks to a lot of what I believe. So all false art and vain wisdom, to me, that is the epitome of the pursuit of what is a lie. Now, granted, saying that also says is making some pretty dogmatic statements. To talk about
it has a presumption that there are such things, because there are many arguments that say it's my expression, my art. That very selfish type of narcissism that goes out there. But who are you to critique my art? Well, Kant says it could be.
Well, there's also another quote about art.
It could be shit.
Where he talks about art and nature, and nature is only beautiful because it looks like art. Which I find interesting, that art is not beautiful because it looks like nature. But it implies, because you're talking about nature is something that is fixed, that there is an absolute, right? And I don't know that he would necessarily go there, but obviously I would. And if something is, not all art is false, obviously, because he's saying all false art, that implies there is true art. Mm-hmm. And that all vain wisdom, that implies that there is some wisdom that is not vain, and by vain is very narcissistic.
Right. Yeah.
So and he's linking the two, and I think that's very true. The art that is narcissistic, the wisdom that is narcissistic, is very much going to be false, and to me, that is very much in line with the skeptic position that we defined with Martin's statement, because we were saying it's lazy. Yeah. That it just stops at the, I don't believe that.
Yeah.
It doesn't even go so far as to say, well, show me how you're right and I'm wrong.
Or why I don't believe it.
Yes.
Why I don't believe it.
Because for Martin, the why and the how are very important to your skepticism. Because otherwise, there's no engagement. And that's important for you. And that's important for all of us. Because I'd say we're all a bit of a skeptic in many ways.
Well, yeah.
In the sense that we want to understand.
Yeah. Kant's not implying the skepticism is bad or even evil. Not at all.
The skeptic that stops at that point is bad.
Yeah, it's intellectually dishonest.
Because I think the restlessness that speaks to you, Martin, is inherent in a fully lived skepticism.
Well, that's Kant's implying that.
I don't know necessarily that he is, but I think for us it is.
Yeah.
It's implied in it. Mm-hmm. Because lacking the understanding means that it is not self-centered. When you seek to understand, to understand rather than be understood, to use a 7 Habits phrase, seek first to understand rather than be understood.
That's very Franciscan too.
Yes. It implies community. It implies engagement, whereas false art, vain wisdom, does not. It is all about the self, all about this is what I say is true, and nothing else can.
Right, which is a consistent Kantian position of it's not about you.
Exactly.
It's about your relationship to others.
Right, which oddly enough,
seeing them as an end to themselves, not a mean to your ends.
Right, which oddly enough is a very Catholic position.
Yeah.
I mean, you really don't get much more Catholic than that position.
So that's filtering into Kant, even though he doesn't get it.
Well, he would reject, I think, any organized religion because he's still very much in that Enlightenment period. So he is still very much it may all not all be about me, but it probably begins and ends with me, because again, he's all about the experience. Right, so that's very much a individual approach.
I find that fascinating. That again, he's searching for a moral scaffolding outside of the religion and the theology that he's used to, but he can't escape it.
Exactly,
it's still ingrained into his experience so much that it still comes out in these intellectual propositions that he gets to.
Which to me speaks of the truth of the faith as well as what he's trying to do. He's just I don't know if he realizes he can't escape it or not, because a lot of times
I don't think he does. I don't think he realizes he's not really escaping faith.
Right.
It's just funny. He's kind of stumbled
into the same proposition, which to me also speaks of the truth of what Augustine talked about with natural law.
Yeah.
You know, natural law being written on our
You're
hearts.
trying to find something outside of Augustine and Aquinas, but he's there anyway.
He's there anyway. Because it is a near universal in the human experience that murder is wrong, that theft is wrong, that sleeping with somebody else's wife is wrong.
Right, because there is an injury there that in the Kantian worldview is you're using others as a means to an end, not to an end of themselves.
Right. Well, there's a double injury. There's that injury, as well as the injury to just what is inherently good. There's because theft. They're wrong in and of themselves, as well as the injury to the other person you are stealing from, whether it's their life or their wife or their goods, or it is the injury to the person because we're using them as things. I think that pretty much covers the piece with Martin and his skepticism and what have you. So your quote about dare, well, not about it was dare to think.
Right.
I think the false art, the vain wisdom, again, that narcissistic, it presupposes that there is no thinking. And by thinking, I think we mean critical thinking.
Yeah, I think that's a fair...
Because critical thinking is also at the heart of your pursuit, that restlessness.
The restlessness
a
of
true
reason.
intellectual thinking.
Yeah.
An intellectually honest thinking.
Because we can think, okay, I think A, or I believe A, therefore I think B, C, D, and E, and so on, but that's not really critical thinking.
Right. I mean, well, the entire political process for
Is
many
that,
is
yes.
just that. They are technically thinking, but there's no
Right, but it's false art. It's vain wisdom.
Very much so, yeah.
And on all sides at this
vain
point.
wisdom.
Yeah, I love that.
I saw Vain wisdom open for Marilyn Manson in 08.
Yeah, there you go. Was it a good show?
No, the Vain Wisdom's bassist was way too messed up.
Yeah,
and he
a
was
little shallow.
He was off. He
Yeah,
was off the low end.
Yes. So this vain wisdom, to me, because again, that's the thinking part. That is
That's
the
right.
lack of critical thinking. And I like that he talks about how it has its time, meaning it's going to have weight,
Yeah.
but it destroys itself, which actually, in a way, gives us some hope. Maybe not in our lifetimes, but some hope that the current milieu of bullshit,
Good word.
The zeitgeist of bullshit,
the zeitgeist of bullshit, yes.
which is another awesome band name.
In the midst of the
Yes.
milieu. I love that
Yes.
word. We should keep going.
Another awesome band name.
Besides Vain Wisdom, the
Yes.
zeitgeist of bullshit, which is a little long to put on an album cover, but it is.
But it would be a great,
good-
punk act, I think.
Yes,
the zeitgeist
yes.
of bullshit. That maybe at some point it will burn itself out, and and in its highest culture, it says it's also its epoch of its decay, which I love that because the epoch of its decay, meaning that's the glory time, right? Yeah. So at its worst is when it is also in its greatest decay, which I think is also true when we think about today's world.
Oh, the beauty of the paradox there is just
Isn't
amazing.
it though? Yes, the
that's-
paradox.
that's-
It is such a great paradox. And it's all because it's a lack of engagement of our critical reasoning skills and the inability or the unwillingness to dare to think.
So that leads me to then a question for you, Robert and Francis.
Lay it on me, brother.
What are we waiting for? Do we need someone to emerge as the person to lead us out of the epoch of decay?
I'm a little torn on that because I think I've said it often enough. I think it's well known if you've listened to the show that I believe that our current path, and that's not to say that the path could not be changed, but that I don't see under current circumstances that anything will change until there is a cultural or economic or some kind of societal collapse, whether it's full scale or whether it's relatively minor or moderate, but there's some kind of catastrophic event.
Collapse or crisis?
Either or both.
Let's go with crisis.
crisis sounds a lot easier to navigate.
Yeah, because otherwise there's too many variables.
Well, yeah. There's always, even in a crisis, there's going to be too many variables because the nation, the world is so complex.
We're going to need a crisis then for someone or for something to emerge to lead us out of the decay and get us back on a path of honest intellectual inquiry.
Yeah,
and that will improve our culture.
That is the hope. I'm not entirely convinced that those are A to B to C to D for this reason.
It may not be linear, yes. Okay.
It may not be linear in the sense that one lifetime will see that. Because the crisis, or if it leads to a collapse, could mean that we have 100 years or 1,000 years of a dark age of some kind.
Well, that's right. We've been to this movie before, unfortunately.
Right. And, because the things that mitigated the Dark Ages, what I would prefer to call the Middle Ages,
right?
Because I think the true Dark Age was much smaller than what people say.
Right.
Yeah. Because the church does not have the same position in society that it did 1,500 years ago, I don't know that there's anything there to be the caretaker of knowledge and reason that the church was at the beginning of at the collapse of Rome.
Yeah,
and there have been societal, cultural collapses in the past. The Greeks had writing thousands, 1,000 years before we think of Plato and Socrates, and they had learning and all of that. But they had their own dark ages, but they lost writing in that collapse. If we lose writing, then we lose that link to our past knowledge.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And
that link to the past reason. That's why in The Name of the Rose, William of Baskerville, why he is so such an intellectual, why he is so excited at the thought of getting to the library at that monastery, because it represents all the lost wisdom of the ages. Now, it's not all of it, and it's not the only repository, obviously, because Aquinas, he has access to those texts, or at least some of what was lost. Because he very much uses the ancient philosophers of Aristotle primarily, and others, to reopen intellectual inquiry, which is a phenomenal thing. Again, but that's a churchman doing it. So, honestly, I'm not entirely sure where things will go. I hope that some crisis will come about that will make everybody sit up and realize, man, this is stupid what we've been doing.
Yeah.
I worry, though, that we are so narcissistic and so tribal that the only way out of that is to destroy the tribes.
In order for them to be rebuilt.
To have something else be rebuilt.
Yeah. It's the tribes.
Now, does that mean tribes of being an American or the tribes of being a Democrat and a Republican? Because honestly, I'd be perfectly happy with blowing up both parties and saying, any of you assholes that are currently in power or have positions of authority in those structures, you are forever barred from any type of authority position again. I'd be perfectly fine with that.
Let's start over.
And let's start over.
Yeah, it's right.
Shut up, Siri.
So anyways, so I don't know. So
Francis, how about where are you, man?
Oh, on this, I think the great enemy is narcissism in many respects, because ultimately that is simple selfishness. So many of the arguments made in today's society stem from that. You can't call someone that, because that's an insult, because everybody knows it's not the way it's supposed to be, and yet everybody still uses the tools.
But, so what's the way out of it? Because I think that's the key to your question. Are we waiting for somebody? Are we waiting, because I think where you might be thinking, are we waiting for another Ronald Reagan?
Well, I mean, it's the same argument.
Or Margaret Thatcher, or
Napoleon. Come on, it's the same argument.
Or is it a Napoleon?
We want somebody who is strong enough to calm the waters. Usually that does not end well, because humanity always suffers.
Right? Do we end up with another Putin, another Hitler, another Stalin?
It's the same argument.
Mussolini.
The argument, the solution is possibly beyond us, because it involves changing, or not necessarily changing, but modifying or redirecting is probably the best word, the worst angels of our nature, to use Lincoln as a thing. We have to make certain that enough people recognize the absolute necessity and glory of service to others. The problem is that can't be nebulous. It has to be something concrete.
Yeah, I mean, right now people don't understand what real service is.
It goes back to the same issue, because that only comes in the context of either the church or the state. Yeah. And both of them can be tyrannical.
Yes,
and therein lies.
And we say that as Catholics.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. I'm not implying any necessarily is that's currently around, but I'm not saying they can't. They're not.
Right. Any authoritarian structure can descend into despotism.
And I'm not so sure that it doesn't inevitably so, but that is a longer discussion.
Well, it can be cyclical, yes, but once it descends into despotism, it is very rare for it to climb back out without destruction.
That's right, yeah.
The church is the only one that has done it.
Right. But it's been remade. It's remade itself in many ways.
Well, it's been... I want to be careful using the term remade, because I prefer, when it comes to the church, we say reform, and not reform as in, take this lump of clay and make it into something else, but reform as in we fix what has gone bad.
That's what I'm speaking of here.
But when it comes to political despotism, there is no fixing generally. It's usually replaced.
Right.
And that's why I say the church is the only one to ever reform, because the institution has been around for 2,000 years.
And a good example of how futile that ultimately is, you can go back to Gorbachev's attempt to remake the Soviet Union. He really tried, and he came damn close. Ironically, though, the forces of history, and it goes back to those 3 days in coup, it forever destroyed that. He could not remake it after that. It had to be destroyed.
Well,
it destroyed itself. It never made it that far.
Yeah, well, could you make the argument, though, that if the plotters had not gone forward, would he have been successful in remaking?
He had a plan, and he had a structure. Therein lies, you will never know, of course.
Of course, I think, though...
He believed he could.
I think even in the restructuring, though, it would have ended up with the dissolution. He would have been out on the outside anyway.
Yeah, I mean...
It just wouldn't have been violent.
Yeah, I mean, he's feeding you one slice of cake when you want... The only real solution is to have the whole cake.
The New Union Treaty, which he was planning on signing, would have given each state in the Soviet Union sovereign authority under him. And they were ready to sign it. Now, what?
Well, that's because I think they all recognized...
It didn't really move from...
it never got a chance, that's the thing.
Yeah, even that structure did not move to economic independence. So I think in the end, it's a failure.
Well, it didn't happen, so it's kind of irrelevant.
Anyway, different rabbit hole. We're at an hour. I'll just wrap this up by saying oddly enough, I'm not as pessimistic as Robert.
I know that is
oddly enough. Yeah. I am optimistic that perhaps the crisis is already upon us. We're dog paddling enough to stay afloat during the crisis, and hopefully something or someone will then emerge that will sharpen the arguments and get us to a point where we can recover some semblance of unity and move forward and hopefully heal up a little bit.
My only issue with that position is that one half is looking at a particular individual as that savior, whereas the other half are looking at that individual as the person we need to be saved from.
That's correct. So one man's savior is another man's tyrant.
Right. And I think... So that's why I say that I don't know that the crisis is upon us yet, because there is nothing... I don't see anyone coming out of the zeitgeist of bullshit or the cultural milieu that we are in as the third way between the two sides yet. Because honestly, I think we have to get past the current individuals. I think only after they are dead and gone is that possible.
And certainly the adoration of a person as a substitute for
intellectual restlessness.
Intellectual belief or intellectual inquiry is a hurdle that may be too tall to overcome.
It's a false dichotomy. I don't see that you could ever.
Just so listeners understand, I don't think you and I are talking specifically about Trump. We're talking about Trump or Hillary or Biden or Obama.
Yes.
Or any of them.
Right.
Any cult of personality.
Anytime you substitute adoration of an individual for
whether
intellectual inquiry,
Trump, AOC, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden,
because
doesn't matter.
Because it's not always in the person; it's the party as well. And ultimately, that's kind of how this has come about: is you're adulating the party, and whoever they tell you is your current flavor.
It is very much a Soviet kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which I find abhorrent that it happens here in this country.
Oh, absolutely, because we want to worship something bigger than ourselves. Yeah. And it's very easy to have that corrupted, as Tolkien would say.
Yeah, to move your worship from the idea to the individual.
Oh, well,
is very destructive.
Well, I mean, you're giving the benefit of the doubt that they're worshiping an idea to begin with. I'm saying they're worshiping the tribe. There is not necessarily any idea there.
Well, I think that the tribe coalesces around an idea.
Oh, it co-opts them, I think, and brings them in.
The tribe then supplants the idea.
Correct. Yes.
Because Trump came to power largely on a populist idea that the little guy is getting screwed.
Yeah.
And it was his set of little guys. Whereas Obama came to power, and the Occupy Wall Street became a movement, which ultimately, was all tied in with the Democratic side. Started with the idea that the little guy is being screwed.
Yeah.
So they have taken the same concept from different points of view and co-opted them into a movement and a tribe that is no longer cares about the little guy.
Only itself.
Only itself. Which again, that's an entirely different thing.
So anyway. Again, another episode that went longer than I expected. Well done, fellas.
And
well
we haven't
done.
even done Kant himself much. That's next episode, though. So,
yes.
wow.
So yes, that we. So go ahead, Francis. Next episode, brother.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're gonna. I suspect we'll continue the discussion because I don't see how we can't. With Immanuel Kant himself, his background philosophy, his underpinnings. And both the right and the wrong with it, he still rises to the top of the heap in many respects. His work is so influential. Almost everything that came after it, he's kind of like broke time in half. There's before Kant and then there's after Kant. It's really worth some study, and we're going to do that next time.
Yes, get used to the phrase categorical imperative.
That's right, because it's coming.
It's coming. Hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes published every Friday at noon Eastern.
Spread the word. We're on all the major podcast platforms. And leave us a comment or review because that helps others find us.
We're on Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com.
I'm Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Join us next week. Same snake time, same otter channel.